Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Diaries Voice, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I snap the laptop shut, and the table rattles a cheap resonance that runs through the plastic cups and the mustard jar and my father's knife tapping the cutting board. No, I say. The air conditioner drones like a tired truck. On the TV, a ball game murmurs in a low Tennessee drawl bottom of the fifth 2-on-1 out. The house smells like smoke and brown sugar from ribs my mother has been basting since noon. Lila laughs from the doorway, already camera ready, a smear of gold on her eyelids catching the kitchen light. We lived in a brick ranch with a sunburned mailbox and a crepe myrtle that shook pink confetti across the driveway. Our street curls over red clay and lawn signs the kind of place where neighbors wave from riding mowers and ask about your daddy before they ask about you. Inside our house, the thermostat stayed at 68, the couch swallowed you whole, and the rules were simple and unspoken. Don't brag, don't make trouble, and remember who the star is. I learned the rules in small increments. When I was 12, I brought home a paper printed with A's and a note from my teacher in blue pen. Avery is relentless. I held it in both hands like a gift. Dad took it, glanced, and set it under the remote. That's what you're supposed to do, he said, turning the volume up so a commentator's voice washed the room. I stood there in the TV's flicker, feeling like a picture someone forgot to frame. That same spring, I asked Mom for $350 to join a weekend robotics class at the community college. Sweetheart, that's a lot of money for little toys, she said, opening the oven, a ghost of heat pushing into my face. You're smart already. You don't need extras. 2 months later, the backyard filled with helium and store-bought sunshine. Happy birthday! Lila Dad shouted, and a used red convertible rolled through the gate with a ribbon living its best life in the wind. Everyone clapped. Lila cried into Mom's shoulder. I carried the cake knife and smiled until my gums hurt. After the guests left, I found my STEM medal under a heap of magazines on the coffee table, a crescent of bronze peeking like a coin lost between cushions. I slid it into the drawer where we kept batteries and orphan screws. The drawer stuck the way it always did. You had to hip check it to make it close. The next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of our old sedan while Dad drove Lila to the DMV for the 6th time that month. You're so patient, Mom told Lila when she came home with a paper permit and a grin. You'll be on the highway in no time. I knew patience by a different name. By high school, the house had a choreography. Dad's newspaper, folding at dawn. Mom's perfume, floating down the hall. Lila's voice running scales or reciting lines whatever the season demanded. I learned to time my requests between weather reports and commercial breaks to catch my parents when the day was softest. Could we look at the used laptop on Marketplace, I'd ask. Maybe after taxes, Dad would say not unkind, not exactly. Later, Mom would fix Lila's hair for a recital, and the living room would turn into a backstage. Look at our girl, she'd say, squinting through the camera until everyone in the frame was Lila. That summer, Nashville baked so completely, the air felt like a damp towel. I rode the city bus to a part-time job shelving paperbacks in an airless store off Nolensville Pike, my t-shirt sticking to my spine. At night, I lay on top of the covers, listening to cicadas grind down the dark. The house had a way of sounding empty, even when it was crowded, as if the air itself had learned to step lightly. I kept my own ledger. In a $2 composition book, I wrote what things cost and what they yielded 6 hours babysitting equals secondhand graphing calculator. 3 weeks of lunch shifts equals application fee. A month of tutoring equals tire rotation because the sedan had opinions. Expense result. Input-output. I knew the line between useful and loved, and I knew which side I lived on. The evening I say no. Lila's leaning in the doorway, describing a vision board squares of glossy paper and promise. Mom's setting out paper plates because they're easier on a weeknight. Dad's humming approval at a replay. The ribs crackle under foil. I pick up the laptop because the screen is the only thing in the room that answers me back. I've color-coded a document no one has asked to see problems to solve users to interview features to test when the sun cooperates. I open my mouth to begin, and Dad makes a palm-down motion over the table as if to hush a dog. "We'll talk about it later," he says. "Let's just eat." I nod, but my thumb lingers on the trackpad hovering over a slide I made at 2 in the morning when the house was asleep and the refrigerator hummed like a faraway highway. It isn't a business plan, not yet. It's a map of something that refuses to stay little. Lila catches me looking at it and laughs. "Avery's always got a spreadsheet," she says, like it's an inside joke about somebody else. Everyone smiles. I close the laptop. The hinge pops a crisp metallic click that feels like a door snicking shut. "No," I say, and it's not loud, but it has corners. The word surprises even me. It isn't a fight. It isn't a plea. It's a refusal to keep performing a version of myself everyone finds convenient. Dad's eyebrows pinch. Mom's hand pauses over the coleslaw bowl. Lila makes a small practice pout. The commentator on the TV names a player with the same last name as our mail carrier, and the room tries to decide what matters. I put the laptop beside my chair like a sleeping animal. "I'm not arguing," I say, calmer than I feel. "I'm telling you I don't need to be postponed." Nobody likes that sentence. It makes time sound like a person you can invite or ignore. Mom recovers first. "We're proud of you," she says, the way people read a sympathy card, eyes on the cursive. "You're so capable. You don't need extras." Extras. I could list them: printer, ink, bus pass, a Saturday morning where I'm not someone's daughter or someone's sister, but just the person who fixes what's broken and builds what's not yet real. I don't list them. I reach for a rib, and the sauce burns my lip in a way that feels honest. We eat. The conversation drifts to a neighbor's new fence, to a sale at the outlet, to whether the gardenias will survive another cold snap. My laptop glows against my knee. I think about the composition book in my dresser with its tidy columns. I think about cost and yield, and a metric nobody in this kitchen wants but me, what it takes to feel like a whole person under your own roof. After dinner, I carry a stack of plates to the trash and rinse the tongs under water so hot it makes steam ghost over the sink. Through the window, the backyard looks like a postcard from a life we almost had lawn chair tilted. Citronella candle burned down to a stub. A plastic wiffle ball caught in the hedges like a moon that gave up. Lila's convertible sits in the driveway with its top up a film of pollen turning red to yellow. I wipe the counter until it shines. Dad thanks me without looking up. Mom asks Lila to send her those pictures later. I slide the laptop into my bag and feel the weight of it, how it measures out the hours I've put into this quiet thing that refuses to stay quiet. The house ticks settling, as if it remembers every time it's seen me do this: clean up, clear out, make room for something that will always belong to someone else. On my way to the door, my knee bumps the coffee table, and a slick pile of magazines slurs toward the carpet. A bronze circle skids out the old metal I thought I'd lost its ribbon frayed to a tired blue. I pick it up, thumb the dent on its edge, and breathe. I don't put it back in the drawer. I loop it over the lamp on the sideboard where it hangs crooked, an obvious an error you either fix or live with. Outside, the evening smells like warm asphalt and cut grass. The cicadas are tuning up for whatever song they intend to play. I unlock my car, toss the bag into the passenger seat, and sit with my hands on the wheel until the sweat on my palms dries. The dashboard reads 7:42. Heat shimmers above the road like something trying to become visible. I start the engine. The belt squeals, then settles. I check the rear view and catch a slice of my self-hair in a hasty knot, a smudge of sauce on my cheek, eyes steady. I don't say anything inspirational. I don't rehearse a future. I just back out slow, careful not to crush the pink confetti the tree has dropped across the driveway, like proof that a thing can bloom and make a mess at the same time. By the time the highway unwinds into the dark shoulder of Georgia, my knuckles have let go of the wheel. The interstate glows with sodium lamps, and billboard saints a lawyer in a navy suit, a peach pie, taller than a minivan, a hand-painted Jesus saves that someone has repaired with duct tape. I stop for coffee at a gas station where the lights hum, and the floor smells like lemon cleaner fighting a losing battle. The clerk nods like we're both night shift. When I pull into Atlanta close to midnight, the rail yard is breathing diesels, idling low, a metallic chorus that shakes the windows of my studio on Memorial. The place is barely a room. A mattress on milk crates, a table I found on the curb, a fan that clicks on the same beat as the crosswalk outside. I set my bag on the chair, open the laptop, and there it is. The spreadsheet nobody asked for sells the color of sunrise and bruise. I don't change a thing. I just let the screen light my hands. In the alley, a bottle rolls until it finds a wall and decides that's enough. It didn't start here. It started 2 hours east, and a couple of years back on a campus made of shade trees and brick, where humidity hung from the live oaks like an extra syllabus. Georgia Tech taught me as much about work as it did about anything people put on whiteboards. I was the girl at the help desk who could resurrect a printer on the third try, the one who ran Ethernet through ceiling tiles and came down dusty grinning because the blinking green light meant a small corner of chaos had agreed to behave. Weekdays were algorithms and lab partners. Weekends were 12-hour stretches in a windowless basement where old monitors went to die and then sometimes came back. Rent was a roommate and a futon that squeaked when you breathed. I stocked the pantry by arithmetic, 10 packs of ramen, 1 rotisserie chicken, a dozen eggs, the cheap coffee that tastes like cardboard until you add sweetened condensed milk and forgiveness. I learned the exact bus routes that would get me to class to work to the grocery store before the sky peeled itself open. I learned the faces of the drivers who would wait when they saw me sprinting backpack punishing my shoulders, the zipper holding on like a prayer. What I loved wasn't the code so much as the moment when the code reached reality. When a thing you wrote tapped a thing you could touch, and both of them said yes. After graduation, I signed on at a logistics startup on the south side, where the office carpet was old enough to vote, and the owner kept a bat behind the door for morale. Our desks were doors on sawhorses. Our meetings smelled like cold pizza and hot plastic from a 3D printer someone bought at a conference and never learned to use. It was loud, profane, impossible, and we were somehow always 2 weeks from either making it or selling the chairs. They sent me out on ride-alongs because I asked to go and because I came back with a notebook full of numbers instead of adjectives. Dawn in DeKalb County doesn't care who you are. It just breathes damp on your neck while you stand in a driveway watching a grounds crew load mowers onto trailers. A foreman with a lightning bolt tattoo on his wrist explained their day. 12 stops if nobody cancels 14, if the weather plays nice 0, if the truck's alternator decides it's done. A woman with a clipboard and a cigarette behind her ear calculated invoices in her head faster than I could on my phone. We lose money in the margin, she said, and flicked ash into the gravel like punctuation. At a handyman outfit off Candler, the office was a picnic table under a tin awning. The boss's nephew ran routes on a map app like he was dealing cards, pushing pins around to turn chaos into gasoline. Half my guys still keep time on receipts, the boss said. They shove 'em in the dash and bring me a paper nest on Friday. When a storm rolled through, they called clients one by one, left voicemails guests hoped. At a landscaping supplier down by Moreland, a line of contractors idled at 6:15 a.m., eyes dull with sleep loading mulch by the bag until their knuckles went raw. Somewhere between the cigarette and the mulch, Sightforge stopped being a phrase in my notebook and started being a thing that tugged on my sleeve. I went home after dark with grass clippings on my socks and wrote until the lines of code felt like fence boards, the kind that fit tongue to groove if you were patient and didn't force it. I made a calendar that understood rain. I made a work order that grew from a photo and a voice memo because nobody out there had both hands free. I made a route that apologized to a map for being less than perfect and then did better the second time. My markers were cheap sticky notes above the sink names of crews, the complaints they said in the same order every morning, the numbers that scared them most. I started asking for pilots instead of praise. A husband and wife team who trimmed hedges in Decatur said they would try anything that kept them from missing their kids' baseball games. A father and 2 daughters who ran a handyman crew agreed to use my invoicing if they could still text clients because email is where good intentions go to die. I didn't promise them the moon. I promised a Saturday. By spring, I had 6 small yeses and a dented cash box of maybe. I wrote up what I called MOU because calling it a handshake we typed made the owners laugh and then get nervous. We met at picnic tables and in the backs of cargo vans. They told me what broke. I took notes in grease and sweat. I tried not to build anything that only a person who sits in front of a laptop would love. The studio made a sound when the trains did the coupling move, a metal-on-metal clang like a cymbal hit underwater. That was my midnight metronome. I ran mock jobs through the system with fake addresses and timer apps, watched digital trucks crawl across the grid while real trucks coughed past my window. On a yellow legal pad, I priced out the boring parts. Nobody wants to name servers, MS fees, the accountant who wouldn't flinch when I asked dumb questions twice. The number I wrote and circled wasn't elegant 85,000. Ugly but true. Enough to turn a working prototype into something that could hold a workday without cracking. I went quiet about it because quiet was how things lived long enough to stand. I carried a small tape measure in my backpack and measured my days like lumber, how much was straight and how much would have to be cut again. The help desk kids at the co-working space started leaving me coffee when they clocked out, and I started leaving them notes on the printer they were losing a war to. If it jams at tray 2, I wrote, that's because tray 2 has trust issues. They decorated the note with a smiley face I pretended not to see, sometimes walking home past the old church with the cracked bell. I'd see crews I knew parked outside the taqueria, guys trading receipts for tacos, laughing like men who only get to laugh between storms. Once the lightning bolt foreman stopped me and asked if my thing could make it so his phone didn't ring after 9. "Try this build," I said, and airdropped him an app file as if that were a normal sentence. He tapped through, nodded once, and put his phone in his pocket like he was handing me a favor back. When the pilots began to talk to one another, one owner calling another to ask, "Is it crashing on Tuesday for you too?" I felt that warm, dangerous lift under the ribcage you get when the roller coaster reaches the top. I took a breath and let it pass. Then I opened a fresh doc and did the math. No one can do for you. If I kept patching nights and weekends, I could keep 6 outfits afloat, maybe 8. If I wanted to hold 30, I needed help. Not talent sculpted from thin air, just hands. Hands on code, on ops on the phones that would keep the right people from picking up at the wrong time. The number didn't change. 85,000. It wasn't a sports car or a showroom or a wall of ferns. It was months of payroll and the kind of infrastructure you don't notice until it fails and ruins your day. I stared at the circle until the ink bled through to the table. Then I wiped the table with a dishcloth because ink stains and landlords don't accept, but it was important as currency. I could have called a stranger. I could have called nobody and kept the circle as a dare. Instead, I cooked spaghetti on a hot plate, ate it from the pot, and opened the message thread labeled family, the one with a photo of a dog we never owned. I typed and erased 3 times, left out the pitchy words left out, the capitalization that makes anything feel like a brochure. I said I'd like to buy dinner if they were free Friday, that I had something I was working on, and wanted to show them that the place had good ribs, and even better sweet tea, which was both true and a peace offering. I booked a table under my name, closed the laptop, and lay back on the mattress while the fan ticked its patient time. The trains moved again, clash, hiss, settle, and somewhere a horn answered like agreement. Friday turns the interstate into a ribbon of brake lights. I leave work an hour early and point the car north, the radio low, a cup of gas station sweet tea sweating into the cup holder. By the time I hit the county line, the sky is the color of a bruise healing. Nashville rises in exit signs and stadium lights. The restaurant I picked has wood tables the size of pickup beds and a chalkboard menu smudged with fingerprints. They serve ribs and catfish and tea so sweet it clings to your teeth. I put my name in. I stand under an air vent that rattles like it has opinions. Dad walks in with his half-tuck shirt he reserves for places with cloth napkins. Mom has a cardigan over her shoulders even though it's August. Lila kisses the air near my cheek and leaves a shimmer that smells like grapefruit and something that costs more than my monthly internet. We sit. The waiter drops off a basket of hush puppies and 3 kinds of sauce. A neon beer sign stutters behind Dad's head, making his hair look like static. I don't make a speech. I tell them about the crews I've been riding with, about the foreman who keeps a lightning bolt on his wrist instead of a watch, about the woman who can price a fence just by squinting at it. I tell them I've written some software that keeps the rain from ruining Tuesday and keeps the money from bleeding out of Friday. I say I've got 6 small yeses. I say I need $85,000 to stop patching with duct tape and start building with bolts. Dad listens the way he reads the sports page, eyes moving one finger on the table, small nods that might be encouragement or might just be habit. Mom pinches a lemon over coleslaw and frowns when a seed escapes. Lila scrolls with her phone under the table edge. eyes flicking up to land a smile when they're supposed to. I lay out my napkin and the numbers I've written on it in my head for a week. Server's SMS, 2 salaries and a half a little for the lawyer who speaks fluent comma. 85 is not a tiny ask, kiddo, Dad says finally, and the word kiddo sticks just enough to make the room tilt. You're doing fine down there. Why strap yourself to something that could yank you around? The economy's a question mark. It already yanks me, I say, but keep it soft. This lets me hold the rope. Mom taps the table with one nail, thinking. We want you safe, she says. You know that. You are steady. You'll make a life no matter what. Some people need a little more scaffolding. Lila smiles like a billboard. Not everyone wants to be the face she offers breezy. I barely do. But I've got an idea I'm dying to try, and that takes a runway. She says runway differently than Dad says it, like the word comes with champagne. It's not about faces, I say. The hush puppies steam, the neon buzzes. It's about the folks who are out there at 6 a.m. trying to make schedules behave. Dad looks at the chalkboard like the special is hidden in the handwriting. We can't co-sign anything right now, he says, gentle, like breaking news late at night. We took on a little debt for the roof last winter. Let's see where you are in 6 months. I nod because arguing in public is its own humiliation. Okay, I say. The waiter asks if we're ready to order. We choose. I cut catfish with a plastic knife that squeaks. We talk about road work, about a neighbor's divorce, about the Titans, if they can just find a decent line this year. When the check comes, I reach for it, and Dad puts down 2 20s fast like reflex. We'll get it, he says. You drive safe back to Atlanta. On the way to the car, the heat rises from the parking lot like the ground is remembering the sun. Lila's voice is warm and close at my shoulder. Don't be mad, she says, which is a sentence that always makes me angrier before it does anything else. Dad's old school. He thinks a good job is a miracle you don't mess with. You're already good. You don't need to prove anything. Prove is the wrong verb. I swallow it. I need to build it where it can hold, I say. She hugs me quick and careful so as not to wrinkle her dress. 2 weeks later, my phone lights up with photos before Mom calls. Lila in a white blazer, arms flung wide beneath a neon sign that says Lila LUXE, in cursive the shape of smoke. The caption throws confetti pop-up lounges, immersive sets, custom nights to remember. A boomerang shows 3 girls in satin sipping something pink on a couch, the color of a tropical bird. There's a wall of ferns and a chair shaped like a question mark. A Tesla sits in the drive bow the size of a child perched on its hood. Mom's voice is bubbles. Isn't it beautiful, she says. She's worked so hard on her brand. You wouldn't believe the buzz. We found an office space with so much natural light you could read by moon. Your father went down to the bank with us, just paperwork stuff. She got a wonderful line of credit. The manager said he hasn't seen this kind of vision in ages. How much, I ask before I can dress the question up. Don't be crass, Mom says, then relents. It's different. It's a business that needs a big push at the beginning. Experience is everything. The limit is 600 to start. But it won't sit there, of course. It's just to get her flying. Dad calls the next day to clean up the edges. It's apples and oranges, he says, as if produce can make a case. You've always landed on your feet, Ave. Lila, she's fragile in ways you're not. This is belief. You don't need belief. You've got proof. Proof sits on my screen like a well-behaved dog, test logs, invoices, graphs that rise like careful bread. I make a sound that might be agreement if you're far away. Okay, I say. The line clicks, and I stare at my reflection in a black monitor until the shape of my face feels like a trick of light. The office tour happens on a Sunday. I go because not going would say a thing I don't want said. The building is glass and white tile, and a lobby that smells like time and money. Inside Lila's suite, the walls curve like they've been to finishing school. Assistants move around in quiet shoes carrying clipboards that match their outfits. Lila shows me a mood board the size of a mattress. Velvet swatches a photo of a woman in a sequin suit holding a silver balloon, a cutout of the word experience in a font that looks like a disco on vacation. We're starting with 2 lounges, she says, tipping her chin toward a calendar where dates have been highlighted with a highlighter that sparkles. Then we'll scale. Everybody wants a moment. Dad nods as if scale is a church word. Mom takes photos on her phone and says, Yes, yes, the way she used to say it when Lila made it onto the honor roll. I stand by the window and watch a couple pose by the Tesla. They have matching sneakers and the quiet posture of people who have had their picture taken a lot. I think about crews at 6 a.m., hauling mowers with belts that don't lie smooth about hands that count and callous. I look at Lila's nails shaped like almonds and painted the color of cake icing. I look at my own bitten to usefulness. Back in Atlanta, the days fall into the kind I can hold right, test ride, rewrite. The rail yard coughs at dawn, and my studio smells faintly of damp drywall and coffee. I add a button that makes the schedule respect thunder. I rewrite an error message so it apologizes and offers a fix instead of scolding. I meet a husband and wife team in the parking lot of a U-Haul and watch them argue sweetly about whether Tuesdays are cursed or only allergic to optimism. My bank app starts to speak in numbers that make my stomach small. One night, the ceiling fan stops ticking, which is somehow worse than when it ticks. I lie awake and count by tens by invoices by the seconds it takes to lose a customer when a text doesn't send. A flyer for a co-working space in Durham sits on the table where my elbow always forgets to lift. The research triangle lives under words like ecosystem and talent pool, but I'm moving because the rent is kinder, and because there's a street in Raleigh where the trucks line up at dawn in a parade of need. I understand. I pay the deposit with a hand that shakes a little and pack my life in the boxes the liquor store wheels to my trunk. The drive east is all pine and billboards for fireworks. My new apartment in Durham is up one flight of stairs that stink of old carpet cleaner. The windows are generous, the kitchen is not. I buy a secondhand table from a man who tells me it's seen 5 Thanksgiving fights and 1 proposal. It's lucky, he says. I say I can work with that. The co-working space smells like warm dust and marker number 2. The help desk kids recognize me from the note about Trey 2's trust issues and wave like we belong to a club with no dues. I take a corner desk by an outlet that pretends to be loose but holds. The man across from me writes firmware for a drone company and eats apples with a pocket knife. He nods when I sit down a small ceremony of acceptance. Money shrinks. I stop ordering takeout and become a person who knows what a lentil can do. I track every text sent through the system like it's a child crossing a street. 2 of the pilots go quiet the same week. One crew got a big contract and forgot to call me back. The other lost a cousin and forgot everything else. I breathe fix a bug that only happens on rainy Wednesdays and keep the phone face down to make the idea of it easier. On a Thursday that smells like cut grass and hot plastic, I stand in line for coffee behind a man in a shirt that says Henderson County Supply. He has sawdust in his hair like glitter. For people with jobs that matter. My phone buzzes. The number is new, but the area code is a place I know. The supplier down by Moreland, where the cement dust hangs in the morning air like a weather report. Hi, I say, stepping out of line so I don't hold anyone up. This is Avery. A woman's voice answers, practical as a socket wrench. I got your name from somebody who swears at you in a nice way, she says. You the one making the scheduling thing that doesn't panic when clouds show up? Yes, I say. Good, she says. Come by this afternoon. Bring whatever you've got that runs on a battery. I look at the clock on the wall, and then at the table-shaped scar where the table I don't own yet will go. The barista calls a name that isn't mine. Outside, a truck downshifts, and the sound rips the air like fabric. I tuck the phone between my shoulder and my ear, pull a notebook from my bag, and find a pen that still believes in ink. The supplier's yard sits behind a chain-link fence, sagging like a tired grin. Pallets of pavers lean in gray stacks. A forklift beeps somewhere out of sight. Cement dust floats in the sun like weather that forgot its cue. The woman who called names stitched over her pocket as May waves me toward a picnic table under a corrugated roof. Battery, she says, and I set the laptop down like a tool, not a trophy. She doesn't want a slide. She wants a thing that survives dirty fingers. I open the build and hand her my phone. May swipes with a thumb scarred along the cuticle, types the word rain into a note attached to a Thursday crew, then taps reschedule. The calendar ripples to next week, leaving Friday clean. She nods once approval, the size of a freight train if you know the scale. You got time for a walk, she asks. We cross the yard to a low office where a whiteboard is choked with routes and names. On the wall is a map of 3 counties and the arteries between them. May circles clusters with a dry erase marker that squeals. 18 crews, she says, tapping each circle. All of 'em by here. None of 'em can keep a promise when the sky gets moody. You keep Tuesday from breaking, I'll put your number in every truck. The trial starts that afternoon because May doesn't believe in later. I sit on the tailgate of a pickup with the sun burning through my shirt and help a crew chief named Bo install the app. He says he hates technology and then remembers his Spotify password faster than I remember my own. By closing time, 4 more crews are live. By Saturday morning, the map looks like a constellation. The first week breaks in the usual places. 2 phones stuck on an old OS, 1 foreman allergic to 2-factor A route that treats a bridge like a rumor. I write patches in the corner booth of a barbecue joint that gives free refills to anyone who can spell brisket while sleepy. The second week, something knits. Jobs snap into order like Tetris when your brain finally wakes up. Bo sends a photo at 9:17 p.m. His boots off a kid asleep against his ribs. A caption made it. May calls from the yard. "You're up to 18, she says. "I told you I don't do endorsements, but I lied. Put me down as an emergency contact. We need hands." I find Diego because he reads a bug report like it's a mystery with a decent ending. He shows up in a thrifted button-down and asks if we prefer tabs or spaces with the seriousness of a man about to pick a god. In his first week, he digs into the scheduler and pulls out a race condition like a splinter. "This was itching me," he says, shrugging as if he didn't just save a morning. We find Renee because every system has a voice, and ours shouldn't sound like a robot raised by lawyers. Renee comes from a hardware store where she learned how to talk people off the ledge about screws. She can pronounce galvanized 7 ways and make all of them sound like comfort. She rewrites our error messages to apologize without begging and teaches me to answer the phone on the second ring, even when the first makes my heart jump. In the workspace, we borrow a dry erase board leans against a wall with KPI scrawled at the top in my handwriting, which always looks like I'm running. We track MRR and marker that bleeds, write churn in a corner, so small it feels embarrassed, and underneath it all we keep a list titled People Who Picked Up Names. We honor because they answered when we called and didn't say who's this. We celebrate small pizza, cold in the box, a playlist that alternates between Ranchera and Springsteen, a dented bell Diego hits when someone pays an invoice on time. On a Tuesday, the yard smells like creosote and fresh rain, a combination that could make the dead nostalgic. A thunderstorm barrels across the county at noon, and roots that should have snapped in half flex instead. Diego watches the logs scroll. Renee watches the phones not ring. I watch May's dot on the map hover near the bridge that the algorithm finally learned wasn't a rumor. At 5:03, she texts just 3 words held just fine. It changes the sound of our days. We go from panicked dings to a steadier percussion like a band that has found its drummer. Checks come in not like a flood, but like a river that understands its banks. I say yes to an apartment I don't hate. 2 months later, I sign for a narrow-end unit off a greenway where cyclists breathe like they invented oxygen. The inspection report lists 1,000 indignities, and the mortgage is the size of a brave mistake, but the keys bite my palm, and the front steps remember feet. I buy a second-hand couch in a color no one can name, and a doormat that says nothing at all. When I carry the last box and the cicadas are calling each other to church, news still travels the old roads home. Lila's opening makes the paper that prints prom photos every spring. A local morning show films women in heels stepping through a hallway of silk leaves into a room with 16 lamps that pretend to be moons. A month later, I see the same room on a different channel. This time, the camera is outside, reading a notice of default taped to the door, while the anchor says the words economic headwinds like they're new. The Tesla disappears from the feed. The office plants go thirsty. A girl in comments asks where she can get her deposit back when nobody answers the phone. I'm scrubbing grout in my tiny kitchen when Mom leaves a message with more breath than words. I call back, and Dad picks up voice formal like we're both on a conference line with God. "We could use a bridge," he says. "Short term." The bank is pressing its advantage. "What number?" I ask, because numbers are the language we have left. "100, he says, a syllable heavy as a sack. "To stop the bleeding." "Your place if you sold now, prices are good. We can make you whole when the dust settles." There is a pause in which the refrigerator hums and the cicadas argue with July and the grout water goes lukewarm. I touch the edge of the counter with my thumb and think of every time my hands have learned a new weight. I'm not selling my home, I say, and my voice comes out level instead of loud. I can't fund what I didn't choose. He inhales like he's about to say something he'll keep remembering. We thought, I know what you thought. Mom comes on the line, tears already falling in her vowels. Sweetheart, we're scared. We'll lose the house. It's the air in my lungs. The air in my lungs pays for this roof, I say, and the sentence feels like it has joints that bend but do not break. I'm sorry. I won't. The next sound is paper moving the choreography of bills no one meant to dance to. Dad clears his throat. Understood. Not a verdict. A record. We end the call on weather and wishes because endings are hard, and because even when the bridge is closed, you wave from your shore. I stand in the kitchen with the sponge in my hand and let the tile go blurry. Then I wring it out, start again in the corner, and watch the water swirl the color of old decisions. When I unlock the door to the office the next morning, Renee is already there with coffee and an eyebrow that can read a soul. She doesn't ask. She slides the mug across the table like a baton in a relay we didn't know we'd entered. Diego lifts the dented bell without ringing it, a superstition we share without naming. The screen wakes to logs to routes to names that look back. Work fills space the way water does. I spend the day inside the small, satisfaction's a cue that drains, in order a button that moves a fraction to the left and makes sense to a thumb. In the afternoon, I drive to the yard with a crate of new flyers Renee designed. No adjectives, just what it does, and how to call us. May reads it once, grunts approval, and slaps one up next to the sign that says "No Credit Extended" in letters that never learn to soften. On the way home, thunderheads sit over the greenway like parked blimps. A cyclist streaks past with a kid trailer bouncing behind little fists, punching the air at nothing in particular. I pull into my spot, kill the engine, and sit until the tick of cooling metal sinks with my breath. Inside the house smells like sawdust and a lemon candle I lit and forgot. On the sideboard, the old metal hangs off a lamp, exactly where I left it, crooked and obvious, something you either fix or learn to live with. I leave it there. The room holds. Morning finds the house smelling faintly of lemon oil and sawdust, a combination that makes the rooms feel awake before I am. The cicadas are lazy this early. The birds have the street to themselves. I water a fern I almost killed last month and wipe a ring from the table with the heel of my hand. When I lift the blind, the greenway is a bright stripe, and the first trucks of the day move along it like punctuation brief sure gone. The laptop wakes to the map. Dots breathe into being, roots unfurl, a small procession of workdays arranging themselves without my hand on every thread. An alert blinks for a crew outside Siler City. Thunder in the forecast nudges the afternoon's appointments to tomorrow, and texts go out with quiet apologies. No exclamation points. No panic. I pour coffee and lean on the counter while the system does what it promised. At 9, I bike to the office with a laptop and a backpack that still thinks it belongs to a student. The air smells like warm asphalt and honeysuckle. On the corner, a man sells peaches from a pickup, the fruit nested in newspaper like eggs. I buy 2 and tuck them into my bag as if they require special handling. Inside the co-working space, the help desk kids are fighting the label maker, which prints every third word in italics like it's composing poetry. I fix it by reseating a cartridge, and we all pretend it's sorcery. Renee is already at our table rolling out paper for a mailing I didn't know we needed. She has a stack of pie box lids repurposed as clipboards, and a playlist that knows exactly when to be quiet. Diego arrives late, his t-shirt bearing a fading logo from a band I've never heard of. Hair still wet from a shower taken too quickly. He has 2 coffees. He puts the extra in front of me without looking up, the kind of grace that makes a morning hold. May texts a photo of a bulletin board at the yard, our flyer pinned between "No Smoking" and "Keep Gate Closed." Under the photo she writes, "Tell the map it saved me an hour today." The dented bell rings, once not loud, because Diego knocks it with his knuckle by accident, and then looks guilty. We all let it stand. Some victories are exactly that size. Before lunch, a chain with crews in 3 counties signs a short contract that took us too long to write because we kept trying to make the words sound like us instead of like a committee. Renee sends the doc, and when it comes back, draws a star on the whiteboard with a squeaky marker that will not quit. I call the number on the signature line, and a woman named Claire answers on the second ring. She says their Saturdays have been swallowed for years, and she'd like them back. We talk through onboarding the parts that pinch. Her voice has the cadence of someone who has been the person with the keys for a long time. In the afternoon, the office turns into a potluck we didn't plan. May shows up with a pound cake you can smell from the stairs. Diego's grandmother has sent beans in a container with a lid that's lost the battle against time. We secure it with a rubber band and call it good. Renee plates everything like a person who trusts that appetite and order can coexist. We eat at our desks because there aren't enough chairs, and nobody minds. When the door opens and the drone company guy leans in with an apple and a grin, we wave him to a slice. The dented bell rings again on purpose this time for no reason, but the fact that sugar is a reason. The light shifts. A storm builds itself out of nothing in the western sky. I hear the first patter on the long windows, the soft drum that makes conversation bend into itself. On the map, routes move like a school of fish. A dot near the bridge hesitates, then takes the alternate the system learned after we told it a dozen times that the shortest line on a map can still be a lie. My chest loosens in a way I feel behind my ribs and between my shoulder blades. When the rain passes, the world smells rinsed. I pack up the remains of the potluck, and the leftover flyers rinse the plates in the co-working sink that leaks if you ask it about its childhood, and wipe the table with the same patience I use on a stubborn bug. We pull the blinds halfway to keep the room from turning into a mirror after dark. On the way home, I stop at the peach truck again, a late impulse. The vendor tells me to smell before I choose, and laughs when I pick the softest one. "That one's for right now," he says. "Don't give it a day, it won't take." I eat it, leaning against the car juice, stinging a cut on my thumb I didn't know I had. It runs down my wrist anyway. I don't chase it. Mail is clipped to my doorstep by a metal mouth that always looks amused. A postcard sits on top a picture of the Opry from a gift shop rack, all lights and angles. The handwriting is my mother's careful, as if the card could bruise. "Thinking of you." Hydrangeas finally took. Love, M. No return address. No instructions. I stick it to the fridge with a magnet a hardware store gave me for free. The magnet says we cut keys and has a tiny serrated edge printed where none exists. I shower with the window cracked and the bathroom fills with the sound of someone mowing 2 streets over. The water hits my shoulders like a sentence that ends where it should. The old metal on the sideboard throws a wedge of light onto the wall, a little crooked halo that wanders if you breathe on it. I leave it. The lamp doesn't mind. Later, I walk the greenway until the sky forgets its color. Neighborhoods talk to themselves. A dog impatient with a squirrel, a screen door with a losing hinge, someone playing saxophone too sure, and then not sure enough. On a field behind the rec center, a group of men in work boots take turns pitching at a strike zone chalked onto a piece of plywood. Their laughter carries. A boy in a too big jersey chases a foul ball until a fence edits his plan. He climbs it anyway and drops back down with the prize triumphant and grass-stained. I sit on the bleacher and let the aluminum teach me its chill. Back home, I sweep the entry even though it doesn't need it. The broom catches bits of greenway grit, a soft accumulation of going and coming back. I lock the door by habit and then check it again because some habits aren't superstition so much as architecture. The house holds its breath and then exhales. The air smells like whatever the day became without anyone announcing it. On the table, my old composition book sits open where I left it months ago, the pages warped from a spill I never owned up to. The columns for expense and yield have given way to names and dates, and in the margin a list I keep adding to without thinking who answered who showed up, who kept their word on a Thursday when it would have been easy not to. I write 2 more names, cap the pen, and close the cover with a palm that's learned the shape of its weight. Outside, the last trucks of the day head home, their beds empty, their taillights low and warm. Inside, the map dims until all that remains are a few pale lines like veins under skin. I shut the laptop, and the hinge clicks the same precise sound it made the night I said a small word in a hot kitchen. The room keeps the sound for a breath, and then files it with the others. I turn off the lamp. The metal loses its shine and becomes just a circle of metal hanging where it can be found. The quiet sits down beside me, familiar as a friend who doesn't need a chair announced. I stretch my hand across the table until my fingertips find the cool edge, and for a long moment I count the grain in the wood by touch. the way a person learns a place not by its headlines but by its proofs. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.